I'm Marcia Eckerd. I'm on the board of Autism Today, and I'm absolutely thrilled to be here with Rob Bernstein. Rob is a clinician par excellence. Seriously, he is one of the most amazingly talented clinicians I know. He's been doing this with autistic kids and families and going to schools for over 35 years. He's He's also written some very important books, and I'd like to especially emphasize Uniquely Normal. It's recommended on most lists of books. And actually, it got, I think, Rob, 4 or 5 gold awards. But what's really interesting is it didn't just get an award for autism, even though it's intended for parents of autistic kids. It got awards for parenting, for mental health, and for psychology. And so that's what an incredible book this is. Go look at Uniquely Normal if you haven't seen it. But anyway, Rob, you're going to talk to us today about coaching parents. I mean, why is that something we need to do in the first place?
Well, look, the parents are the ones who spend more time with their child than anybody. And if they're the key person in this child's life, then they need to feel empowered with that. And, I know the system or based on like a medical model, bring your kid to a specialist, they work with your kid or fix the kid or diagnose and give medication for and then you go home, you follow the directions, and the parents aren't involved with that process. But education has fallen into that, you know, teachers the expert, they do what they need to do to help the child, whether it's speaking or whatever it is. And then the parents take, it's kind of a secondary role instead of being a partner, instead of being part of that process. I'm not saying that teachers should have all the answers or the parents should have all the answers, but why can't it be a duality where they're both learning from each other and knowing what to do, and the parents being more empowered of knowing what to do with their kid? And I guess your point is that the parents sometimes need to be not encouraged, but no trained. And I think of it as training. At least that's what Ram Kairam, who I interviewed for our Autism Today conference, who's a champion in autism training, and we've been doing this for decades. And he devoted his life to parent training. Maybe there's another way of saying it, but that's what I want to emphasize, and I wish more conferences emphasize that.
So, a parent has an autistic child and they come to you and you want to coach the parent to be able to be with their child, work with their child, whatever. Where do you start?
I was going to say that. Where do you start? Well, you start with what's the point of view of the child. As far as what we're with the parents, you start with what the parents feel is the most important thing for the child, what they think, for the child or for themselves. So that's where I start. I start with the needs of, let's say, the parent. The kid comes home and I have to spend 1, 2, sometimes 3 hours. I feel tortured. I feel that I'm, just going through this process of difficulty and frustration with the kid almost every day, going through doing what what the kid needs to do for homework or something like that. So I want to know what the parents. It could be the kid. We can't go out for dinner because the kid runs around. Well, that's the culture my family is going out. The culture my family is reading in the evening, and the child. I want to know what the parents. And it's funny there are so many examples what the parent would like for the. One parent said, "I'll tell you the most. This is a kid who couldn't talk. That wasn't her primary goal. The primary goal was here's a kid who's on the spectrum, lining things up. They just line things up all the time. That just drove her kind of nuts. Like, just help me with that. or my most important thing is for the kid to call me mommy. I mean, I want to start and answer your question, where do you start? I want to start where the parent is at that time.
So you're not only, and sometimes parents might not be so much frustrated as simply wanting to know what's best for the child. And, but I would think listening to the parent and the parent concern, you also get a sense of and how do they interact with their child about it. And, what is it the parent's doing now? And what do you suggest they do? How do you begin by helping them understanding maybe a good way of being with their child?
That's a great question. In other words, if they may not be really be connecting, they may not even really be listening to their child. Um, and I know that's a kind of a simple statement, and like, well, of course they listen. Well, no, no. I mean, just really listen to what the child is saying, and from the child's point of view, and that's a good way of of perhaps changing what you've been doing. And it could be the parent, the mother, or the father. Okay, I'm the boss. Yeah, it happens a lot with fathers. I'm the boss. I'm going to tell the kid what to do, and he's going to listen to me. Well, maybe the kid just needs a snack, or maybe the kid is hungry, and maybe the kid is
Right.
tired. Like there might be some kind of legitimate, reason why the kid cannot do that at that time that you're demanding.
Right. So
So
you're basically talking about instead of the parent saying, listen to me, you're saying listen to the child because using your example of the going out to the restaurant, the parent may be trying to use the model they've been taught, which is if you go to the restaurant and you said then afterwards you'll get to play your video game or afterwards we'll go get ice cream. It may be that the restaurant's a really noisy environment or there's never anything on the menu that the child can eat and then it's a miserable experience. And that's the problem, not, just not doing what you're saying. So number one is listening to your child and finding out actually what's going on, if I'm
right, a quick example of a kid that has meltdowns, and then everything stops, and then whatever they're doing, this is like a picnic with a couple of families. He's having a meltdown. Everything has to stop. He has to come home to his comfort zone, which are video games, right? And and then we went through a list of things that could be happening with the child. And what was number one? The child might be hungry. Now, what's interesting, and you know this as well as I do, kids sometimes aren't in touch with their own feelings, and they don't really realize that they're hungry. And so, out of the many number of, lots of things that the kid may need, number one, it's a very easy thing to eliminate. Maybe the child is hungry, and if he has a little snack, some granola bar or something, that may be then the meltdown, he's not having that meltdown. So think of what the kid might need as opposed to what demands you have of your child, and you're not listening, and you're connecting with him.
you're making a really important point that, in listening to your child, you're also pulling on your experience of the child and knowing the child because children may not always be able to accurately self-advocate. So you're listening, the child may be telling you things, but you know from your experience that when the child is hungry, the child has a lot of trouble. And so it's both listening to your child and knowing your child because you're, as you said at the beginning, the one who spends the most time. So, I think that's a really, important point that you've got that you're saying that the parent is drawing on their own knowledge, but also listening to what the child is saying and watching what the child is doing. And but it's not a behavioral approach of, okay, I'm going to reward you if you do X.
Now, I love that what you just said, because a child I have my own expression, and don't steal this from me, that a child may be good all day in school because the child is trying so hard. Well, other kids are just relaxed. They're like really need to concentrate on listening to the teacher, and not move too much. And it's working. And the teacher says, "Oh, the kid had a wonderful day," but the kid is like my expression is, or on all four burners the whole day. Now the kid comes home, and like when you have a stressful day at work, you have to unwind a little bit. So this kid's way of unwinding may be for this kid to be kind of wild, you know? And that's an example of like, okay, if that's what he's doing, then maybe we let the kid unwind in his own way, whatever that is, playing video games or whatever, running around as long as he's not hurting himself and so forth. Um, Maybe just, give him an hour. Instead of coming home, you have to do homework,
Right.
right? So that's an example of maybe, you could be more aware of just what you're saying, what the kid might need. And it's up to the parent to realize that, because the kid doesn't realize, hey, mom, I just need time to unwind. But
Right. Right.
that's
That's
an example of what a parent could do, or how I coach parents to have their kid be, more productive.
right. So number one is, listening, but also listening between the lines, so to speak, listening with what you know. Let's say the parent does want to intervene. Let's say that the child's, doesn't want to put on his shoes to go out to because he knows it means going out to the car to go somewhere, or there's something else the parent needs the child to do, and the parents sort of like, how do I, okay, you don't want me to say I will get you a ice cream cone if you put on your shoes, so what's the other way of doing it? How does a parent, intervene in a way to help the child, you know do what's needed or wanted?
Right. A lot of kids don't like the feeling of putting on shoes. They sometimes don't like, a shirt with a collar. I mean, there's all kinds of, and there might be a time when, yes, you need to do X. I had one parent that literally dragged the kid to school because there was no choice. He had to go to this new school at the time, and otherwise he's going to be truant and so forth. And it's like, okay, how do you get a kid to do something like the shoes example? Um, and I, of course, there's no one answer, but if there's a way for the kid to naturally realize that, yes, shoes serve a purpose. And if you're going out to the car and the kid has to walk on gravel and it hurts, it's like, okay, maybe this idea of shoes is a good idea. Um, Sometimes it only takes um, preparation. In other words, kids don't like to change. They like, routines and so forth. And maybe it is like, hey, we're going outside, you have to put on your shoes. And, maybe that's enough. So we have to see what's going on with the kid. But yeah, you're right. There are times and the challenges, and I get this a lot, that it's time to go to sleep. Kids not doesn't want to go, it's time to get up and go to school. I mean, that's sort of written in stone. And now we have to find ways of ideally getting the kid to want to do this instead of forcing the kid to make it even more of a difficult situation.
So, maybe part of it, from what you're saying, I know that you don't advocate dragging kids places, is trying to help understand what's getting in the kid's way, or what the kid might be negative, what might be wrong about the ask, and having it have, kind of adjusting it, whether it's giving advance notice or whether it's understanding, what's uncomfortable, or it might be understanding that it's literally the transition into the school that's so hard, from the car to the school, and how do you make that work? And so again, it's really starting where the kid is at, starting with understanding that.
And so, like what you're bringing up now could lead to a very simple solution that if you think it's a sensory thing with the shoes, then maybe just let him walk with slippers. I have an adult in his 20s. He gets fired from a job because there's a dress code that he can't wear a t-shirt. And he explains to them, I cannot, this is literally the way it is. I cannot wear a collared shirt, so I need to wear, and this is a job where it would have been fine for him to wear a t-shirt. It's not like he's working in a law office or something where, but they have a code and they don't get it. They don't understand it. They don't accept what he's saying. So he actually has gotten fired a number of times. So it's like, and then if there's a parent involved, parent training, maybe they'll listen to the parent, or the parent will say, "Hey, get a doctor, to call to talk. Maybe they'll listen to somebody to say, "Hey, this kid isn't just giving you a hard time. He's not. I'm not being non-compliant. He really cannot wear the shirt. So we'll find a shoe that fits and is comfortable." But it starts with, I don't want to put on my shoes. And then the parent has two choices. You have to put on the shoes because we have to leave. Or, all right, I'm going to take that seriously. Let's figure out why. Maybe it's uncomfortable. Maybe I could find a different pair of shoes. We figured out one thing with shoes, right? A while ago. These kids, we're going to get them to have Velcro. Remember, we figured that part out. Shoes with Velcro. We all accept that. All right. But maybe we have to go to the next step and have something even more comfortable, right? It's just a continuum of
Right,
understanding kids.
right. So it's really kind of understand what you're asking, really is what you're saying. Understand what you're asking from the kid's perspective, and go with that. And then you might need to say introduce ways of having the ask be either more palatable, giving the kid a little more control, being able to meet the kid where they're at in terms of, I think that with kids, it's sometimes parents don't feel listened to, right? I mean, if the school
Yeah.
has a dress code and you've got to wear a uniform and it's scratchy and it's uncomfortable, and maybe the school might say, I'm not listening to parents, so the parents still might need to go to the doctor and work with the school to figure something out. So but basically your idea is that the parent is listening and kind of working with whatever understanding what is your ask, understanding what is it and what's in the way. And it might just be, I'm not interested, I don't want to. And what do you do with that one?
When a kid says, I'm not interested, I don't
Yeah,
want to.
you want me to do that, and that's just boring.
Right. Well, maybe it's boring and he's not interested because you're asking him to do something rote that really isn't interesting. In other words, I'm taking what you said, which is said in a certain tone. Now, what do you do? And I'm saying, wait a second. I still want to listen to the kid who says, I'm not interested. Okay, maybe you're right. Maybe there's something about doing what he's doing that really isn't interesting. And maybe we could make it interesting if the kid understands why he's doing it. It
Right.
might be as simple as that.
Or there might be a way to frame it in terms of the child's interest that makes it more engaging, for
Yes,
example.
yes, that's a great idea. Where a quick example of a school saying the kid has to um, watch a TV show and write a little paragraph about the TV show. It's a writing example, but the kid doesn't watch TV. So the kid asks, "Can I do this on with a book that I'm reading, and then write something about the book?" And in this case, I know this is unusual. In this case, it was a private school. The dean said, no, it has to be a TV show. I'm saying I never yell really. I started raising my voice. I said, wait a second, it's a writing assignment. And like, I couldn't believe. I kind of sort of messed up a little because I told the kid the day before, I'm going to your school, and don't worry, I got this. Don't worry, you'll be able to do this writing assignment by looking at a book, and and I was so sure, but they just said no, it has to be watching a TV show. But the kid doesn't watch TV. It's like it didn't work. But at least the kid knew I was on his side.
Yeah, and that's, I think, the point that I think you're making, which is that often it's the parent who's going in and saying the kid doesn't watch TV and running into that stone wall, or or whatever, whatever the subject is. And if ideally a school would be, you'd be able to find somebody there who has some flexibility, or maybe they can watch it on YouTube, I don't know. but the but the kid knows the parents on their side, instead of it's everybody against me, which is
Right.
how things feel a lot. It's they know that, hey, that the parents, a trusted adult, the parents in my corner. And whatever this thing is, parents with me, and the parent understands where I'm coming from. And I think that's so important for the parent-child relationship, isn't it?
It's so important. And there's a word that comes to my mind, trust. It's very important. And the idea that the parent is not listened to, right, which happens a lot, is something that you and I want to change with the book that we're writing currently, that we want to change that dynamic between the school and the parent, because it's just that's what's going on with the system. There's a dichotomy between teacher, professional, and parent who is a parent. And I know this personally. My kid's on the spectrum. I spent, and this is true, 3 hours from 6 to 9 o'clock. It was at night. 3 hours with the teacher explaining to her about my child, and I'm good at this, right? She listened, she took notes, but did absolutely nothing because, after all, I'm just a parent. So it's like, oh, it could just, you know. But the least that could happen is that the kid knows he's not alone, and that means everything. That means
Yeah,
everything
I
for the
think
relationship.
that's huge for autistic kids. When I talk to kids, knowing that they're not alone, knowing that they've got that family support and that family understanding is just critical, because otherwise it's like the whole world is just, not understanding me, not with me.
Right.
You've been talking a lot about a parent and, one child, but some parents have more than one child. They might have a neurodivergent child, a neurotypical child. They might have two neurodivergent kids. And now you're coaching the parents in at least a two ring, if not a three-ring circus.
I think it's exponentially difficult.
Yeah. So what can you say to a parent who has, I mean, and when you have two kids, they're not always in sync. So
No.
how do you help a parent think about, how am I going to handle it when I've got two kids and they are not in sync?
Yeah, it's really it's like 2 dimension to 3 dimension. It's like a different animal. It's not the same answer because now you have a family dynamic that needs to work. So now you have to respect and listen to both kids' needs as well as your own as a parent. Parents are so thankful for that. I actually care about them and their sanity. So now you have to care about yourself and the kids and listen to both of them. And now, like you say, they differ or they have a conflict or one's hitting the other, and it's like your head could explode. So, but that's the perspective that you want each kid to be heard, to be listened to be respected. And if the neurotypical kid, and I'm thinking of Jeannie Safer's book with the normal one, so the so-called normal kid has a need that I want to invite some friends over, but wait, your reaction is no, you can't because your autistic brother uh, is having therapy and it's going to interfere. You have to create a balance. You have to create a balance that maybe your other kids friends coming over is really important. It's really important. And you have to create that balance and listen to everybody and make and have the two kids respect each other's needs because they both have
Yeah.
their own needs.
Yeah, I mean, not to be overly revealing, but you have personal experience of this, right?
Oh, I do. Uh, with myself and my own kids. And yeah, you're right that my older one who's on the spectrum um, didn't like, he was jealous of his younger brother because now all of a sudden that everything is surrounding him. And he would really be a hit, his younger brother. And I remember my mother saying, I can't wait for younger brother to be old enough to hit you back. So this is going back to the early days of a sibling. And I finally, and I gave this example to some parents as well because I had the same issue. I finally told the older one to say, you know what would happen if your younger brother is totally non-competitive? Because that's what you're saying. You're jealous of him. Let's say he's in a wheelchair, he can't talk, he's severely impaired. And would you rather have a brother like that? And that way you don't have to worry about competition. And he took me seriously because he was young enough, you know. He didn't say, "Oh, Dad, you're kidding. Cut it out. That's impossible." No, he took me seriously. And he said, "Oh, no, 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 no. I wouldn't want that." And that was enough for him at that time to change his attitude towards his younger brother. So that was just one tidbit of what
Right.
I did.
But to back up, you probably listened to your older boy and figured out that the issue was competition, that the issue was, envy either of what he was able to do or his the ease with which he had friends or
Right.
his kind of accomplishment, and that the issue was competition. And I would imagine there could be, we're just talking about the one child now, there could be a whole lot of different issues, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Many different issues that it doesn't have to be jealousy. It could be time. Just the parent is spending so much time with the kid who is on the spectrum. The other one feels kind of left out and feels that they have to be the good one. And that was with me because I have and still have an autistic brother. I was the good one. I went with my mother shopping because I was the good one. I didn't have a choice because I wanted to be the good one, but it was like I had to be the good one, and that puts me in that kind of position that I was, and my mother told me I'm the good one, and like, all right, that's again, there's not much of that balance that we're talking about.
Right, that's not really asking you what your needs were, or picking up on whether that worked for you, whether you always wanted to be the good ones. Maybe sometimes you wanted to not be the good one.
Right. And I grew up in not having a strong sense of who I was. This is true. I never told anybody this, but it's true. It wasn't until college that I started to understand who I was. I'm walking along with this big shot upperclassman. He really is cool. This really Mr. Cool. And he said, um, he asked me, what do I like? In other words, what's my passion? Who am I? And I didn't know. didn't develop that. And he said to me, I still remember this, he said to me as if I were 4 years old, he says, listen, I like cars. What do you like? I remember this. And I didn't, in other words, looking back at it, I didn't have that development of myself, of who I was. Probably for the first time, I'm realizing this because of you, Marcia, probably because I was never, asked or developed, or I was never, it wasn't the attention and intention of my parents for me to develop who I was. It was always like, you're the good one. You're going to do anything that we need you to do. So you're right. You're right. You're a good psychologist.
Did anyone ever explain to you kind of what the situation was with your brother, or why he maybe was having issues that were going on in the family?
It's a good question. And the answer is no. And he never got any kind of label or anything. And it wasn't until he was in graduate school that he himself knew that he was on the spectrum. So oh wait, when I'm talking about my kid, oh, I'm getting confused. My brother, no, my brother, similarly, my brother didn't know he was on the spectrum until I was asked by his colleague, a faculty member of the university where he was teaching, right? And so this is, he's like in his 60s, I guess. And the faculty member, this woman, calls me up and says, is your brother on the spectrum? Because she knew, I was an expert in autism. I go, wait a second, this is a loaded question. She's asking me, why is my brother on the spectrum? I said, why, what's going on? And she said, well, we go to these faculty meetings and he's always in the corner by himself. And I need to know if he has, but she said, Asperger's, I would, okay, I get it. And I would actually marry him. But if he's just an asshole, if he's just an ass, then I wouldn't. So my brother didn't realize he was on the spectrum until he was already a professor. So this has gone on for all these years without me knowing so much or him knowing that he had this issue, to answer your question.
But I think then what you're saying is really interesting because a kid may or may not be diagnosed. A kid, may or may not be correctly diagnosed.
Right.
But, you know, if a, but the parent kind of can see the two kids and the parent can see the dynamic, and in your case, whatever you called it, even if they didn't call it your brother being on the spectrum, clearly his behavior was such that they needed you to be the good kid, right?
That's a good point.
And so, we're really telling parents, in a way, it's more than just having a label. It's understanding who these two kids are, what is going on, and then it sounds like your parents were confused about helping your brother or understanding what was underlying his behavior, and so they didn't know what to do with him, but they certainly but certainly the solution of not listening to you wasn't a particularly good solution for you.
That's right. That's exactly right. Confusion is an understatement. And listening to me or looking at my needs just didn't exist. Didn't exist. It was totally ignored. And
Right.
you're right, because they must have known that he had these exceptional needs, but never really knew what to do.
And you mentioned that your son wasn't formally diagnosed until he was a young adult. I take it your brother was a young adult and not 60 when he got married. But your son was a young adult, but as a child, did you realize he had special needs?
Oh, I knew it since he was 2 or 3. And then when he started I guess kindergarten or first grade, and the teacher said, we're going to have to put him in a special reading group because he's behind everybody else. And then, like, wow, my kid, and reading is one of my subspecialties. I go, my own kid. It looked, and then I started working with him personally. So I knew um, he was, likely to be on the spectrum when he was like 3 years old. But he didn't know it until graduates. In other words, I wanted to, as best as I can as a professional, to avoid the system, and we managed to do that,
Why?
coach.
I mean, we've got parents sitting here listening to you, and maybe they have a child who one child has a label, one child doesn't, or maybe they're dealing, or maybe they're here at our conference because they're curious about neurodiversity and they're looking to see if a child is neurodivergent. And so would you tell them, they're not professionals in autism, would you tell them, don't, go to the system, don't try to see if your child's neurodivergent?
I know. I think it's different now. I think it's different now. I think knowing uh, the classification, knowing he's on the spectrum, does just the opposite. It gives parents and the person himself, and you know this from your work with young adults who are mostly women, that it lets them breathe. Like, oh, that explains why. You
Right,
know, explains why I'm like this, and I have difficulty with this, and I have difficulty with relationships, and it's hard for me to hold down a job. Okay, now I get it, and now I can work on how to get these things better. So it's entirely different now. Um, Back then, what I was afraid of is that he would get labeled, be in some special class with kids who are much more involved than would be. He was, and it just be a spiraling down process.
right.
So I did
But
what I,
you're,
but
you're
now I think it's changed totally.
yeah, you're bringing up a really important point, though, that I think, again, if we have parents who have neurodivergent children, it's not news to them that they need to listen to their child. And I think this idea of being the trusted person, being the person the child knows is in their corner is such a critical point. But there are also a lot of parents who have kids who aren't diagnosed, and maybe they don't look like the stereotype of what people think autism is. And so they're going undiagnosed, but the parent knows what's going on. The parent sees, and they say, hey, the kid's getting good grades, and what's your problem? But the parent sees the kid as isolated, or the parent sees, that the kid comes home every day and is lonely or whatever. So, you're really trying to encourage parents to go to the system, and the system's not always responsive.
It's not, but we have to find that one person, if not the school psychologist or whoever could may help in the school. It's really up to the parents to find somebody who could really help this child, and whatever red lights appear, like, I just realized since seventh, eighth grade, my kid never had a friend. I mean, he's had good grades. He's going through the system. The system mostly cares about grades. They don't emphasize that by the end of the year, my goal for this kid is to have a real, genuine, mutual friend. I don't see that in the IEPs. But as a parent, wow, you want this child to have genuine friends, good relationships, because you want them to have a healthy life, be with a partner. They don't see that. The kids don't see that. And so a parent, it's tough being a parent, sees that there's an issue. So now, okay, I might not know what to do about it, but maybe I can get somebody who could tune into my kid and help in this way. And it's not an
Right.
easy.
And so you're talking about, you know, parents understanding their kids and trying to get them help for what they need. I had one parent of a girl who the school really didn't have any friends to offer her, any good candidates. So she found a Dungeons and Dragon group that
Right,
the girl could go to, and she loved the Dungeons and Dragon group. And here are some people who shared her interests. So I think, I think you're talking, there's a lot of talking about understanding a kid's challenges, but there's also understanding their strengths too, isn't there?
right, right. And that's why there's no absolutes with these kids. Oh, he's on a video game for an hour a day, the same thing. And like, wait a second. What is it? What is he doing? And I'm thinking of one kid who did this role playing, very intricate role playing. They create their own characters. The characters have relationships with other. It's like, wow. And I suggested, and he really got kind of close, right? To, the characters that got close. He got close. I said, well, is it possible to actually meet these people? So he traveled to the middle of the country to meet these five. They were all over the place, right? But they gathered together in I forgot where it was exactly. It might have been like Minnesota or something. And they actually met each other. So it's just kind of what you're saying, that wow, this was, the way he could really connect and be real friends with others. So if the goal in mind, the overall goal is, gee, my kid doesn't have a friend, then it doesn't have to be a typical, play date with somebody who, like you said, there might not be a good candidate in school or in the neighborhood. And maybe there's another way of doing this.
Well,
In-
I know my daughter wasn't on the spectrum, but she had very significant learning disabilities. And so there was a lot of pulling her out for special teaching. But she had a strength in that she was an amazing singer. And the school had a strong theater program. And that was where she was sort of a star. And so I think, one of the typical things for kids on the spectrum is that they have special interests, but it's sometimes, I think it's hard sometimes to get that special interest valued, or give the kid an avenue to follow out that special interest, which might engage them so much more in school, right?
yeah. No, the special interest, you have to pay attention to it. I had a young adult, he was into, see, now this is a good, example for most parents, because meetup groups are common now. So this kid was into anime. So there was an anime meetup group meeting every Thursday in a restaurant in New York City on, I think, 34th Street. I don't know, they still might be there. And I would bring them to this group, about 25, and everybody was really obsessed, or really into, a couple of them were professionals. It was amazing. They had movies, and it was just really a interesting group. And here's the tricky part, and this is something that's needed, and I did it, or I helped facilitate it, and either the parent or maybe the leader could take part. But out of these 25 people, I kind of assessed them, and in my head, and well, I don't want my client to be involved with this guy, because this guy is so obsessed. We don't want another. We don't want a kid on the spectrum that's like, But I found a kid I thought was perfect, young, another, absolutely perfect. And I said, and I waited for the right time when he was free on the other side of the, room that was part of this restaurant where we met. And I said, now's the time to go to him. And because she trusted me, he started going. He says, no, I want you to go with me. I said, okay, I'm right behind you, literally. Go and say hello just say hello to the kid. And he did. And I knew that kid just welcomed him, told him to sit down. And I just retreated. And they wound up being good friends. They traveled to Boston together. And it's not just a same interest. And that's a mistake we as adults do. Oh, this kid's also interested in anime. Does that mean they're going to be friends? I don't know what people think that way. But I knew the personalities would match. And then they went to anime stores together in New York City. It was just wonderful. So your point is well taken. Take their special interests seriously, and maybe that could lead to genuine friendships and a happier life.
Well, and also, I think that, I mean, I know you've done this, so I'm bringing up something I know that you've done. There was a kid who was acting out in school, and but you knew that this kid was a musician and and a songwriter who actually had a decent following on Spotify. And you brought that to the school. I mean, to find a way, it's not just with the goal of having friends, which of course is so important for our kids, but also just to have the kid recognized for his strengths, that you had his music brought into the school.
Yeah, and teachers have good hearts and they want the best for your child. There's no need to be angry at teachers. And take this example. I know there might be a couple examples like this, that the kid was into making music and there's a lot of social media, and that school's that wasn't really accommodating him. So I connected. All right, again, it doesn't take a genius. There are people who are experts at social media, and the school accepted on Zoom or whatever platform they had for a team of people to be part of the school day. Like 45 minutes out of the school day, that kid could learn music, social media with other kids from the school. So they made it sort of a class out of it. I'm not saying it had to be once a day. It could be meeting once a week, but it encouraged the child to enhance his interest. And your point is so well taken that the school welcomed that, and it was a wonderful experience.
Yeah, I know of a little girl. She was in second grade, and her special interest was the Titanic. And that's not exactly a major source of conversation among second graders. But the teacher had a day where you brought in something that was special to you, and she brought in a model of the Titanic and talked about talked about the Titanic and what happened and everything. But the teacher picked up on the importance that this child needed a platform, needed some way of being seen in the school in
Mm.
terms of her strengths. And so she made her the class Titanic expert and created an entire display on the wall that the girl did about the Titanic. And there's a way of kind of involving the child's strengths, right, in the school itself, and sort of showing off the child's strength so that they can be identified not just with challenge but with strength.
And it comes down to listening to the kid. Like I had a kid who was really interested in World War II and Hitler. And I happened to have Life magazines, if you remember that, from the 1940s, an interview Hitler did with, I guess, a journalist from Look magazine, and I believe it was 1936. I still have this. Hitler actually did an interview in 1936 where he says that he wants to, rule the world. I mean, things that we turned out to be, true. But like you're saying, instead of like saying, oh, and I needed the parents' permission to show the Life magazine article that had pictures of Holocaust victims. I mean, it was wild. But like you said, at least the least of it is that the kid knew I would listen to him. Going, it's so important. And then what we do with this information, whether he does a report or does an exercise, it does a whatever the academic goals are, whether it's writing or I mean, let's first listen to the kid and kind of feel that he's empowered instead of not listening to him.
Yeah, I think that so often kids get defined everywhere by their challenges instead of by their strengths. And, like you said, whether the Czech kid's strength is that role-playing game or, knowledge of history or anime or whatever it is, that, having some things at school that are respected and engaged makes such a difference. So we're getting we have about 10 minutes left. And I wondered if you want parents to come away from your talk with a couple ideas that they can kind of grab and say, okay, so I want to be a coach for my child. I want to be, your idea is so critical here. I want to be I want to be a trusted person for my child. I want my child to always know I am in his, her, or their corner. What takeaways would you like our parents to have here?
Okay, I'll give you a phrase that that I use, and it's in the first line of my manual, and that is, and that's kind of what we're saying. But I'll give you a phrase to encompass what we're saying, the last thing that we're saying, and that is, let the child lead. It's another way of saying listening to the child, go with his special interest. But if you want like a phrase that kind of could guide us, it's letting the child lead, as opposed to, right? We know what it's opposed to. I'm going to tell you what to do and you have to do it. So let your child lead and see, and then go from there. Um, the other message that I would give to parents is don't give up. I mean, if you look at our example, this kid is interested in the Hittites or whatever. I'm going to find an expert. I'm going to find somebody who could connect with my child with relationships or friendships because the school's not, don't give up. Finding, that person that you think that you feel the child needs. If my child needs a friend, I'm going to find somebody to help my child. And, you know, try once or twice. We'll try, 5, 6, try 20. I mean, don't give up on take the shoe example. That shoe's uncomfortable too. Okay, maybe he has to wear moccasins or slippers. I mean, don't just try something and just give up. If you think, and here's what's important, your child. If you think like, oh, here's the issue. It's a sensory issue. You got that far because you know your child. Well, don't give up on trying to figure out a way for it to work. I mean, in my practice, I do exactly that. If I know exactly the kind of thing to elicit language, I got it. I'm not going to give up on that. And I have videos of these kids saying their first words. But what I always tell parents in my talks is that, oh, you're saying that, but what you don't see is that I've tried like 29 times before this, and it didn't work because I have a sense of what is going to work, and I'm not going to give up. If it were to be so easy, and if it worked the first time, there would be no problems. So that would be my message, not to give up on any of the things that we're talking about. The sibling example, which could be overwhelming. Dealing with the school, which could be overwhelming. Find a connection with one person in the school that gets it. Don't give up on what your child needs in order to progress.
Well, what you just said brings something to my mind, which is that parents, it can be overwhelming sometimes dealing with the school. It can be overwhelming sometimes, dealing with multiple sets of needs simultaneously when you actually also have your own in there somewhere. It can be, there's so many things that, you know, not giving up, being able to be, to be able to be that, to be all of this that we're talking about, that a parent really needs support too, that a parent can't, you know, do this alone. And, do you find that parents need either a support group or other parents to find other parents who are having a similar experience or someone like you? I mean, is that your experience, that parents it takes a community.
That's a great question. To me, it's very complicated. So if the parents have issues within themselves, then they need help. And it could be a support group, that might do wonders. It could be another professional. It could be a friend to help them. But the reason I say it's complicated, because I would go to one mother and I said, look, I really want to help you, which is your question. And she says to me, you know how you can help me? Help my kid. Get my kid to talk or whatever it is, right? That's the only way you could help me. So then it becomes sort of a different question. But the bottom line is that if the parent is doing well, it's like the airplane, example with the oxygen mask. You have to help yourself first before you can help your kid. And it's really true with what we're talking about. The parent has to feel calm first, and before, if we think of self-regulation, which we didn't talk much about, the parents have to feel regulated first before they could calm their kid down or help their kids' anxiety. So the focus really has to be on the health of the parent in whatever way that may take. Then the parent will be centered enough, if you want to think of it that way, to help the children or the family dynamic.
Yeah, I think you just raised a new point, but I think it's so important. I'm gonna, emphasize it, which is that how important it is for the parent to be regulated. I mean, you may have kids who aren't regulated or other people, you may be dealing with, non-regulated other people, but how important it is for the parent to be a regulated or a calm presence, and that calm presence is so much, which might take a lot of work, but it's that calm presence. Is that what you were saying?
Exactly what I'm saying. And what you said is important. It may take a lot of work, but we need it's necessary. You have to care about yourself. It's not easy for some people to care about themselves because they're running around caring for everyone else. They're the caretaker. But wait a second. Yeah, it may take a lot of work is the perfect phrase, which means like, hey, you have to spend time caring about yourself, whatever that means. And that's so important.
Yeah. Well, Rob, it's been great talking with you. And I think you've offered a lot of really good advice to parents. And your contact information is in the our bios. I think our bios are there somewhere. But you want to tell people how to get a hold of you if they have other questions?
Oh, well, my website is robertjbernstein.com. That's uh, that's one way of getting in hold of me. So why don't we, why don't we just stick with that, robertjbernstein.com, and you can email me, call me. I'm available.
Okay, that's great. Well, thanks so much, Rob, and thanks for all that you're doing. Okay,
Thank you, Marcia.
it's been a pleasure. Bye bye.